Welcome to this episode of Talk is Biotech. Samir, great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Guru. I'm excited to talk to you.
Perfect. Let's do a quick introduction, if it is okay.
Yeah, so my name's Samir. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Forest City SynBio. Forest City SynBio it's a startup itself, but it's also a startup incubator and accelerator for early stage life sciences companies with a special focus on synthetic biology. And we're based here in London, Ontario, in Canada.
Great. Would love to know a little bit about you. Why did you end up starting this whole bio incubator?
So I first became introduced to synthetic biology during my undergrad. I attended a lecture by a professor who later became my graduate supervisor, talking about the work he was doing in California at the Craig Venter Institute, working on synthetic genomes and artificial cells. And I was just hooked right off the get-go, and I thought it was the most fascinating stuff. I became especially interested in learning about the ways people were using synthetic biology to solve problems and create value. I've always had an interest in entrepreneurs themselves and, how they think differently and how they, strive to create value and step out of their comfort zones and so on. And so I first got involved in the community. I got involved with an organization called SynBio Canada. In the US, you guys have eBirc and their Student Postdoc Association. It's kind of the same idea. It's an organization that helps scientists and students stay connected and provides more awareness to the field for the general public and does things like advocacy and stuff like that. And through that role, I got to meet a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and people who were actively founders of synthetic biology or life sciences companies, and became really clear to me that there was a lack of support for them, especially here in Canada. When they, are just starting out, it's really hard for them to get funding as well as find lab space to develop their proof of concept. And it really takes a special type of mentorship and support network to help these companies get off the ground. And so Forest City SynBio was born out of seeing this gap and wanting to bridge it. So we started in 2018 as a volunteer initiative. It was a lot of active students as well as recent graduates working together to do research about the industry and networking and seeing what could we do to help advance entrepreneurs that are doing this work. And last year, my co-founder Shay and myself founded the company with a vision of creating a hub where early stage companies can find lab space as well as a network and a community that can provide them with funding and support to get them off the ground. So, yeah.
I remember first time I extracted DNA. I think I was in high school. So I used to have like a secret lab in my closet. First time I extracted DNA from strawberry using some detergent and other chemicals. It was an enlightening experience when you realize this small, like what you extracted is basically a blueprint, that plant, that fruit. So it's really a magical experience. And it's really inspiring to see how biology is becoming more like engineering. So that's where the SynBio is. So historically, we treated biology as a field of discovery because it's a really billions of years of old industry, right? So there's so much to be learned. But now what is really exciting is we are seeing biology as more like an engineering field, right? How can we re-engineer it? How can we leverage organisms and their blueprint, DNA, and align it with our interest? It's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing DNA extraction from strawberries in high school. And yeah, that's what really first got me into the life sciences, was seeing how this field has advanced so much that it's gone from being about discovery to actually being about design and using DNA as if it were Lego bricks to piece together new systems. It's just fascinating.
Right. So what is your vision? Like what exactly you are trying to create here? Every entrepreneur want to create a new reality, right? So challenge the status quo and want to create the new world, the better world that they believe will change the world, improve the human experience or save lives. So what is your vision? What you aim to do in, let's say, 5 years, 10-year period?
So I guess there's kind of two parts to my vision. The first part is really my fascination with the science itself and seeing that it just has so much potential to create solutions for problems that we all care about in health and environment and food security, and just wanting to see it happen. There's so much going on in the universities and in these academic labs, but we still aren't seeing the fruits of this labor in the real world and actually making that impact that we know it can make. So I guess one part of my vision is to accelerate that in whatever way I can and to see it come to fruition. And the other part really has to do with my love for cancer Canada, and I grew up here, spent most of my life here, and seeing this opportunity where we have a critical mass of people that are doing this work. We have great research that goes on in our schools, and the opportunity is there. And it's kind of disheartening to see that it hasn't materialized yet. And so I really have a vision to see Canada become among the leaders in the world in this area, but potentially also become the world leader in synthetic biology commercialization.
I couldn't agree more. I think bioeconomy, so we all are talking about semiconductors, the electronic space, because of obvious reasons, but most countries are still not taking bioeconomy very seriously like they should. They are still prioritizing budget, but they don't understand how big biomanufacturing and bioeconomy is going to be. It can become like a major contributor to most GDPs. So countries not investing heavily now, I think next 10, 20 years when energy sector, defense sector, your food industry, or your healing like pharma industry, they all will rely on the core like a biology. So there's a huge need for that. We need more bio entrepreneurs. We need way more investment. I know we are seeing hundreds of thousands of new companies every other year, but I think we need way more investment and more entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you see it happening in, the US is obviously doing a great job. The UK, Australia is catching up, and other countries in Europe, but Canada is really, we're a bit behind, and I really want to see that change. And actually, Built with Biology, or what used to be called SynBio Beta, they just released their report on 2021 investment, and you saw 18 billion going into it, which is more than all the money that's gone into synthetic biology companies since 2000, which is incredible. It's just growing so fast. And we really need to see more of that happening in Canada.
Right. What do you think are the drivers for this bioeconomy? Like, what do you think are the pillars? What should we focus more on to really take this industry to the next level? Like bioindustry, not just pharma, not just energy sector, but whole bioindustry that includes feeding and healing and fueling the world, like energy, food, pharma, all different segments. And now we have a new industry of biomanufacturing. So all the things you see in the world will be manufactured. Most of the things will be manufactured biologically, eventually at least.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, McKinsey predicts 60% be bio-based by 2040. So absolutely. Yeah, I think so. There's a number of drivers. There's definitely, the scientific and technological drivers. You see the cost of DNA sequencing, I mean, for a long time now has been going down very quickly. And now synthesis is also becoming increasingly accessible and cheap. There's still a lot of work to be done there. And obviously there's some great innovations in enzymatic DNA synthesis that are going to really open the floodgates, because that's, I guess, the main technological driver of the whole industry. Everyone needs synthetic DNA in this world. And then there's infrastructure. And so that's kind of where Forest City SynBio is trying to contribute to helping address some challenges. You need lab space, you need scale up infrastructure, you need biomanufacturing infrastructure, bioreactors. There's a lot of great work being done there, but still the demand is far exceeding the supply when it comes to this kind of infrastructure. So, we've secured some lab space that we're now providing to startups, and we have plans to develop more. And I think then there's also, talent and research and programs like iGEM that have created, entire generations of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurially minded scientists,
right,
who are thinking about how to use synthetic biology to solve problems. I think that's a huge driver. And then there's also things like the private investment and public investment that's going into this space. And I think COVID did a good job of making people understand the importance of biotechnology and realize that there's something to do here. And on the flip side, while there's increasing privatization and private investment going into this space, there's also a lot of democratization going on as well, with organizations like the Free Genes Project, the Just One Giant Lab initiative. There's these communities that are forming around, and community labs that are forming around, how do we make this technology more accessible so that more people can get involved. And then there's also regulatory drivers. So again, it's still, the technology kind of leapfrogs the regulations, but there's a lot of active advocacy and engagement between scientists, entrepreneurs, investors, and governments to think about how do we promote innovation while at the same time protecting public interests, the environment, health, and preventing misuse of the technology and so on.
Right.
And another one is the sort of public perception of this technology. And that kind of there's a bit of a legacy from the GMO era that still has an effect on how this technology is received by the general public. But I think at the same time, we're we're seeing a change in attitudes towards genetic engineering technologies, especially among millennials and Gen Z folks who see the value of using this technology, especially when it has a benefit for the environment, or the popularity of veganism and the opportunity to create alternative proteins and what used to be animal products but are now being produced through biomanufacturing. So I think those are some of the big drivers. I'm sure there's others, and you could probably name some yourself, but yeah.
I love it. Love it. And if I have to add one more driver, I would say virtualization of the industry, digitalization and virtualization of the industry. Because if you see, this industry is very hyper specialized, right? If I'm the expert in high throughput screening, I still need help with, let's say, cell culturing work, right? And it's not smart, it's not economical to have all the strengths, skills in-house. You cannot do that, right? Like 3D printing technology or 3D cell culturing, like there are specialists doing on that. You cannot really catch up with all the advancement in all different fields, but you need help in other segments. It's a very hyper-specialized, interdependent industry. So the only way to make biology scalable is by making it more distributed and connected digitally, connected virtually. So if I am the expert of NGS, I need to outsource some part of other things that I'm not expert, I don't have expertise in, I should be able to easily collaborate, transfer data, in some cases even share IP if that work requires some IP sensitive collaboration. But currently, I think it's very disconnected. So most biotech companies, they raise tens of millions of dollars, but if you see the money they are spending on things, it's not necessarily novel in most cases, right? So one pharma company creating an animal model that recapitulates Alzheimer's disease condition. It's not novel. There are many other companies have done that before or outsourced it before. So why don't we have this like cloud kitchen concept? So you have these like hub, maybe FCSB becomes like a hub with hundreds of thousands of companies with different expertise, like a whole catalog. And then someone running a biotech, they don't have to enter the lab, maybe in early stage prototype or early stage work. But then you, as long as you know what needs to be done for regulatory approval, all the steps, you just collaborate, outsource, or different models of working together, right? It can be outsourcing, or it can be more IP collaboration, or it can be academic collaboration. So I would say virtualization will be the main driver.
I think there's going to come a time when you'll have bioengineers just doing this all from home and on their computers using CAD tools, and then uploading it to the cloud, having their organisms manufactured at a foundry, having it scaled up at companies like Culture Bioscience that are just engineering this infrastructure to biomanufacture. Yeah, no, there's definitely a big opportunity there for virtualization and collaboration.
Culture Bioscience is a customer, so it makes me happy. So yeah, so what I'm super excited about is every bio company we see is it's like a set of labs, right? So some early stage company, they have one lab or they are completely virtual. They have to rely on it. So our goal is how can we connect every lab on this planet? And then like a buyer working from laptop, maybe Starbucks, or we are in Canada, we should say Tim Hortons. So from Tim Hortons, they should be able to first design using in silico tool, their experiments, and then easily delegate this to different academic partners, CROs, or other companies with domain expertise in that specific area. So that's what we aim to do. So what I'm super passionate about is how can we digitalize the entire company and then automate on top of it. And then in phase 2, how can we connect these labs? Because once your data is in digital environment, you have all the audit trail, so IP part is covered, then how can you connect them? So there are many different ways to do that. Blockchain, decentralized science is a different way, but even in the centralized systems, you can do a lot and fill those gaps. You mentioned like citizen science piece, right? So there are many, like there's quite a bit things the citizen scientist or garage biotech can do, but there are regulatory concerns. Right? This industry is very regulated for obvious reasons, right? You don't want to create a new strain that can create a future pandemic. So those worries, I understand why those worries even exist. But at the same time, I'm super excited about the whole concept of garage biotech, because biotech doesn't belong to few group of elite PhDs or well-funded biotech. Biotech belongs to everyone, right? I don't do programming, but I still use computer. I still use internet. So why can't we do the same thing with biotech? The only extra layer of complexity is extra regulatory layer. So what are your thoughts about it?
No, I mean, I totally agree. I see it the same way. I think it's really exciting development to see more people taking synthetic biology, bioengineering into their hands outside of academic spaces, because I think that diversity of perspectives, of experiences that goes into this research and technology, that's what's going to really drive the innovation that solves real world problems. Because, I mean, while academic research is great and scientists doing this work is super important, it's really a very different mindset when you're doing research for a scientific purpose versus you go into it with a problem that you recognize and you've experienced perhaps, or people around you, and you're on a mission to try to solve it. That's really what's going to drive the really interesting applications. But yeah, at the same time, I mean, we need to have systems in place that can prevent misuse, prevent unforeseen negative consequences of these new innovations. And it's going to be a bit of an arms race between the advances of the technology and the advances in biosafety and biosecurity precautions that are put in place. The nice thing is that there's a big awareness in the community, including in community scientists, sort of DIY citizen scientist spaces, of the potential risks and hazards of this technology. And so everyone is cautious about trying to be proactive, trying to engage with ethicists and sociologists and people who can help to think about what are the societal, environmental, and human implications of this work. You can't really go to a conference on synthetic biology without there being a section dedicated to those kinds of ethical considerations. So it's really good to see that. And I think the only way we're going to be able to stay ahead of those concerns is with a lot of communication, a lot of public engagement to engage or to understand people's concerns, allow them to be part of the process. And we're going to need a lot of investment into things like, I guess, the equivalent of antivirus software for biology to be able to stamp out any potential misuses or harmful applications that may arise.
Love it. So what type of hurdles you think we should focus on? So ethics is one piece to really empower citizen scientists. So if we have clear set of guidelines, I think citizen scientists have a starting point. Currently, someone working in the garage, there is in different countries, it's really challenging to know exactly what they can even do. So what type of so we definitely need clear guideline, but also pro citizen scientists. So we do want to encourage these tinkerers to come up with the next cure for cancer, or to come up with a more, economical way to produce fuel, or more environmental friendly way to produce fuel or food. So what type of things we can focus on to develop this bioeconomy? Because without making it more crowd powered, more distributed, I don't think we will have this true bio revolution, the promised land we all are talking about.
I mean, I'm by no means an expert in any of that side of things, but I mean, I keep an eye on what's going on, and there's a lot of interesting work being done on things like alternate genetic codes to prevent, genetically engineered organisms from spreading their genetic information into the wider ecosystem. There's things like kill switches and things to prevent organisms from surviving outside of their intended environments. There's security measures with companies that produce DNA synthesis that screens any orders to make sure that sequences being ordered aren't potentially dangerous. You even have people like George Church calling for a licensing process that has people become registered in some sort of system as a bioengineer, so that there's a level of surveillance going on. I mean, whether or not that actually happens is, to be determined. But I think that kind of stuff is what's probably going to be needed, is a way to monitor what's being done, but at the same time recognizing that it's going to be near impossible to monitor everything that's being done. Just thinking about how ubiquitous biology is, the raw materials are everywhere. So as long as the knowledge to use it is there, virtually anyone, anywhere could be doing synthetic biology. So it's really going to be a matter of the safety innovation, security innovation staying well advanced and well ahead of the broader use of the technology. There just needs to be constant investment and innovation going into new solutions that can prevent, outbreaks or prevent any misuse. But at the same time, I think, talking about this stuff is super important. And I think being cognizant of this is important, but it's worth remembering that one, first of all, the people doing this stuff are aware of these concerns, and the vast majority, and potentially I would say everyone doing this work right now, is doing it with good intentions and doing it for good reasons. But secondly, the beneficial applications, I think, far outstrip the potential negative consequences. We need new solutions for disease. We need new ways to produce food sustainably. We need solutions for sequestering carbon dioxide and turning it into things that are more valuable rather than just burying it in the ground and hoping it turns to rock in thousands of years. We need these solutions to be created. So I don't think slowing down the innovation or stopping it is the way to move forward. I think it's an awareness and understanding and a constant innovation to stay ahead of the risks.
Sure. And how is it in Canada? Because we are based here, so I would focus on this area more. So what are the rules in Canada? So if I want to start a lab in my garage, like what do I have to keep in mind? Like, is there any proper regulatory approval process? Or if I'm not working with any, I don't know, harmful chemicals and biomaterial, I can just start a lab? Is there any like approval process?
I mean, it happens a lot. You see a lot of people, entrepreneurs, citizen scientists doing this work at home in their kitchens, in their garage. To be totally honest, don't know the exact process involved, but the requirements for a containment level 1 lab are really simple. I mean, you just need a space with plumbing, and the HVAC requirements aren't anything crazy. It's a fairly low barrier to entry. And I don't think you need any kind of special certification or anything like that. There's definitely regulatory authorities that will occasionally audit labs, and you need to be on top of the required, compliance requirements. But I don't think there's anything preventing somebody from setting up a lab in their basement for the most part.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you mentioned barrier to entry. So in general, not just citizen science, what are those barrier to entry if you want to start a bio startup? So I know you are making it easier for company, at least in this area, to start a new company, scale a company. So you give them initial infrastructure. So what are those barrier to entry compared to if I want to start a tech company?
Yeah, so the 3 big ones that we focus on at Forest City SynBio are the funding, the lab space, and the ecosystem. So it takes a lot longer and much more capital to start up a biotech company versus a software company. You usually need a lab for the most part, and you need a very special type of support community around you. You need mentors who understand the science and also understand what it takes to get it through the regulatory pipelines and onto shelves or into the market. And you need investors who understand synthetic biology specifically, because there's often a conflation of biotech with health tech or med tech, and really it's expanded far beyond the health and medical applications. And I think that is still something that a lot of private investors and public agencies are still catching up to, that understanding that the risk has significantly reduced from what it was, a couple decades ago. The time it takes to take, a small molecule or a food ingredient to market is significantly less than trying to get a pharmaceutical approved.
Right.
And the amount of capital and how difficult it is to do the technology, that's all changed significantly. And another big shift is that, is important for people to understand, is that in a lot of the applications of synthetic biology, it's really moved from being a scientific process to being one about technology, where it used to be, about experimentation. I mean, it's always about experimentation, but it used to be about having to have some, fundamental discovery before you can think about commercialization. That's really changed. Now it's more about the tools are there, the knowledge is there. What are we going to apply it to? And it's more akin to a software developer who, all you need to know is the coding language and have a good idea of what to use it for, and you can create virtually any idea that you have. So that's really changed, and I think that's something that when we talk about barriers to entry, finding investors who understand this and finding mentors who understand this stuff and are able to guide you through the process, that's a big challenge, especially considering it's a relatively new field. And so there aren't a lot of people who've successfully created companies using synthetic biology, for instance. But the big one still, I think, centers around finding a place to set up, getting that initial seed funding. In the US, there's this awesome program, SBIR, which is great for early stage startups trying to get that non-dilutive funding to get started. In Canada, we don't really have anything similar to that, which is unfortunate. We do have some great funding programs and good, wage subsidies and support for early companies. But SynBio kind of falls through the cracks, and you end up having a lot of scientists who have a great idea, but they just don't have the resources or the infrastructure to develop a proof of concept. And it just makes it very difficult to get started.
Sure. So you think like SynBio needs its own set of grants, like not like current grants offered by Canadian government, like IRAP, and the different tax incentive program like SHRED.
Yeah, a lot of the funding that's out there for this kind of stuff is still very much academically oriented. It often is for researchers that have, a university position, they have a lab. And when it comes to anything private sector related, unfortunately, the private sector is usually seen as a source of funding as opposed to an area where funding is also needed, especially for startups. And so, yeah, I think especially with synthetic biology, since it's so application heavy, or application focused and industry focused, we do need, I think, a new set of programs that support science entrepreneurs in their early days.
When I learned about Forest City SynBio, I was wondering, why did you choose London, Ontario as a place to create this new hub, new ecosystem to empower bio entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so with startups, I mean, a big part of the success of an early stage company comes down to the community and the location it's set up in. And that's why you end up with hubs like Silicon Valley and Boston and New York and so on. And that, requires a critical mass of companies to have formed there and achieved success there. And that attracts investors, that attracts more entrepreneurs to come to the space. But the raw ingredients of what starts that off are, a lot of it is present here in Southwestern Ontario and in London, which is kind of the heart of Southwestern Ontario. You have great talent, great research that goes on. It's a university city. And you have a pretty strong tech ecosystem. You have good organizations here that support tech startups. And what we're trying to do is translate a lot of those factors over to the life sciences. And a lot of it just comes down to education and advocacy and helping people understand that there's, this is the next big tech revolution. And there's no reason why we can't have that here. We have, it's a big agricultural region. It's very strong in the agri-food sector. London, Ontario, one of its big industries is food and beverage processing. And that's where a lot of the lower hanging fruit lies for synthetic biology applications. And it's also the fastest growing vertical. I think it was in Q4 of last year that food actually exceeded the investment in health in synthetic biology. And you see that trend continuing to grow. So what we're doing is, we're very much focused on agriculture and food. We're tying ourselves into the agricultural communities. And there's a lot of agri-tech investors around here as well. And we're promoting that message that, if you have a synthetic biology idea or startup that centers around agriculture and food, this is really a great place, especially if you're already in Canada, is a great place to set up and tie yourselves into the ecosystem, the existing agri-food industry, and bring that innovative biotechnology into it.
I agree with you. And even I decided to move to Kitchener-Waterloo to start a business. I was in Germany. Before that, I spent about a decade in the US. And my motivation was access to talent, like University of Talent. It's amazing talent. And also proximity to US markets. So Boston is not too far, and you have 2-hour flight. So there are many reasons, and it's very affordable if you compare it with other biotech hub. So I wouldn't be surprised if we create new tech hub, SynBio hub in the next decade in this area, Kitchener, Waterloo, London, many places in Ontario.
Yeah, absolutely. The affordability is a big one. I mean, the cost of living here is less than half of what it is in Toronto, and same goes for real estate. It's a growing real estate market, but it's still relatively affordable for people to come to. And we're still close enough, especially where you are in Waterloo region, close enough to the Toronto GTA center to benefit from that cluster, but far enough away to also benefit from the decreased cost of living in real estate and so on.
Right. Great. I would love to double click on Forest City SynBio. So what exactly it is? So you said it's a bio incubator. So do you want to double click on it and explain how does it work? Who are your resident companies and what they're going to get out of it? And what is your business model? So someone listening who is still wondering what exactly is FCSB, and how would you define it?
Yeah, so there's really 3 offerings right now that we're building out. One is lab space. So we're actually just opening doors to our first pilot facility in April. And that's going to be a co-working lab where early stage founders can work on their proof of concept. And that's going to be a rent-based model with some opportunity to negotiate in terms of reducing rental fees in exchange for equity and things like that. The second thing is the community that we're building out. So we have a founder network, which is a virtual space where founders can find peer mentorship, but also some programming, things like Ask Me Anythings with experienced entrepreneurs and investors, lawyers, et cetera, and workshops, things like that. And that's going to be built out over the next year into a more comprehensive program that will provide early stage SynBio life science entrepreneurs with the tools, the knowledge, the connections to get started as entrepreneurs. And a lot of the time, this amounts to turning scientists into entrepreneurs. And then the third aspect is investment. So right now, we're offering a small pre-seed investment for kind of idea to proof of concept stage founders. And really that investment, it's nothing super substantial, but it's helpful for a founder who wants to be able to work full time on their initiative. And, whether it's leaving academia or quitting their job to be able to focus on their startup, that's really what it's meant to help for. And the vision for long term is to turn that into, it's going to be the proof of concept for what will ultimately become an investment fund. So really the business model here is a long-term play. As startups grow, our vision is to grow with them and make returns off of their exits and dividends as they grow.
Love it. Love it. Now, I really like what you said. It's time to turn scientists into an entrepreneur, because historically, whenever we thought about CEOs or C-suite, they were mainly marketing salespeople. They always sound very polished. They know how to use all these buzzwords and create a good story. Storytelling is still very important, but now it's really great to see how inventors, scientists, all these genius minds are taking the driver's seat. And I won't be surprised if in the next couple of years, in the decade, the world is led by these special talent as a better place to live. Great. So I would love to get your thoughts, because your aim is to empower bio-entrepreneurs to start company, empower them with all the resources they need, even help them raise money. So what are those trends? So you talk about, especially in this area, ag bio, food bio is really big. But what are those trends in SynBio, not just specific to Canada, but in general? So what do you see currently are really hot? Because when I go to Twitter, I see how people are combining bio with metaverse. So the whole Twitter is excited about decentralized science and metaverse in the biotech space. So what are your thoughts about the current trends?
Where I see there's probably the hottest trend is cellular agriculture. And that is, ranges everywhere from the, more simple stuff of taking a single protein or a small number of proteins that are normally produced by animals or plants and taking them, the genes that encode those proteins, and manufacturing them using microbes. So you see great companies like Perfect Day that do that, and New Culture and so on. So that's huge. But then also at the other end of that spectrum, where you have lab grown meat, or what's now known as cultivated meat for the most part, people taking stem cells essentially from muscle cells of animals and cultivating them in bioreactors and being able to produce meat, not on the back of cows, but in a bioreactor. That's a really big hotspot in synthetic biology, is that cell ag focus. There's obviously lots of work going on the ag side of, optimizing crops for various purposes. You have companies like Pivot Bio, which are working on the nitrogen problem, trying to find alternatives to chemical fertilizers. And that's where a lot of my academic research goes on. So I'm also a PhD student, and my lab focuses a lot on plant biotech. And then I think there's an opportunity in supporting existing businesses and existing business models. For example, brewers are basically microbiologists, and often they are. And finding ways to enhance their processes using synthetic biology, I think, is a huge opportunity. And there's some startups that are starting to tap into that. And, there's so many other facets, things like yogurt, cheese, kombucha, right, other fermented foods. You're using microbes, but using synthetic biology, can we find ways to make it more efficient, more sustainable, more healthy, more whatever, nutritious? And there's lots of opportunity there for sure.
No, love it. What I'm super excited about SynBio is, if you talked about producing milk in the lab as one of the examples. So what they're basically doing is they change the machinery to do the production, right? So cow is producing milk. What they did is why can't we just engineer your cell lines and create cow-like environment in a fermenter and produce milk? It's really smart, right?
Yeah, it's
And
brilliant.
you just want to know what is your end goal. If cow is producing casein, like protein, right? How can we train, let's say, microbes to do that? So some cultivated meat companies are also doing that. So what's the name of that lab-grown meat company in San Francisco? Really big.
Upside.
I think it's either Beyond Meat or the other one. They're using like heme protein. Impossible. They're using heme protein to add that similar taste that you generally sense when you consume animal product. So it's really powerful what companies are doing. Totally. And it looks like nature has most of the solution that we are looking for, right? So these days we hear stories, scientists are doing scuba diving to find that specific bacteriophage against a bacteria. They're going to caves to looking for some unique strains, bacteria, other microbes. So we have many answers in the nature, and it's a job of us bio-entrepreneurs to find those answers, leveraging what we already have in this nature.
Yeah, a great example of that would be, climate change and dealing with greenhouse gases. The solutions are there in biology, and we have photosynthesis. It's just a matter of how can we use photosynthesis, enhance it, or perhaps implement it in different ways to be able to address this greenhouse gas challenge. And yeah, the solutions are there. Nature gives us the tools. We just need to be clever enough to take advantage of them.
Yeah. I have two more questions. Then we will wrap up. First is, what advice would you give to bio-entrepreneurs? Someone or aspiring bio-entrepreneurs, even someone ready to start a company, not ready, completely sure yet, and they're looking for some tips and tricks to be successful. What advice would you give to them?
But one thing that I've picked up is really the value of talking to people about your ideas, especially if you're an aspiring founder. Often you go in perhaps with this idea that you need to keep it all a secret because you don't want somebody else to steal your brilliant idea. But usually obviously there's concerns about IP and things like that you need to keep in mind. But if you have a great idea and you're the one to do it, the only way you're ever going to get to realizing your vision is going to be by talking to people, learning from them, testing to see if they also can share your vision, and seeing if you can influence people to join your team, to support you, to fund you, etc. And that's not going to happen if you keep it all to yourself. You need to be able to talk to people about your vision. And I think the second thing that I've picked up is really the value of chasing your curiosity wherever it takes you. And that often means, reading books and listening to podcasts and engaging with topics that are perhaps outside of your field, outside of your previous experiences, because you never know where that next big inspiration is going to come. And, creativity a lot of the time comes down to connecting different ideas that at first seem unrelated, but together they give you the solution to the problem you've been racking your head about for months or whatever.
I love your advice. I think especially first-time founders, they want to keep everything secret because they think the idea is really powerful. But what I learned is ideas, it's great. It's good to have great ideas. To realize any of your ideas and making sure people are benefiting from it, it's like it takes decades sometimes to really make that happen, right? So I learned this, fortunately, but more you share, more you more perspective you can incorporate. You can get rid of your blind spots sooner. Otherwise, you learn only from your mistake. I don't think it's the most efficient and smartest way. So sharing ideas, I think it's a great advice for anyone who is starting out a new business.
Yeah. And talking to people who you think can be your customers as early as possible. At the end of the day, if it's your idea, if you're the one really the right person to do it, it all comes down to execution, and no one's going to be able to execute it better than you. So you shouldn't worry too much about someone taking your idea and running off with it, because it's going to be hard to execute. So just work on it.
100%. As an entrepreneur, your dream is to create a new reality, a better world. If someone get inspired from you and execute better, so what? I think it's great. That's what you want, right? So you should try to execute better. And if someone can outcompete you in execution, then I think they deserve to do that part. So I think sharing is really important. Last question is, if bio-entrepreneurs looking for space and curious about Forest City SynBio, what is your eligibility criteria and how they can contact you? What is the process to apply for space at FC SB?
Yeah, so we have an inquiry page on our website, but people are always welcome to reach out to us directly, LinkedIn, or you could email me at Samir, my first name, at fcsb.ca. So it's really well suited for very early stage founders who want to build out their proof of concept, validate and test their idea. It is a rental based model, so you do need to have some funding to be able to afford that and to be able to operate. Of course, we're willing to work with people to make it as accessible as possible, but the main criteria, it is a biosafety level 1 space, so there won't be any, it's not really well suited for anyone doing pharmaceutical or health related applications who needs a BSL2 space or a biosafety cabinet, things like that. It's really meant more for molecular biology, cloning, but mostly microbial and yeast culturing, bacterial and yeast culturing. And we do have, like I said, a special interest in agriculture and food, but even, we're not exclusive to that. Some of the companies we're working with are doing some stuff outside of that. And even, though we're very interested in synthetic biology and that's what we want to advance, there's, other ways that people can advance the whole industry by doing things like you're doing with, software or bioinformatics or 3D printing or other types of adjacent technologies that can help grow the ecosystem. We're obviously interested in anything that's going to help to advance that entire industry.
Great. Samir, what you're doing is really inspiring, really potentially impactful. So thank you so much for spending the last few minutes with me. And I'm looking forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Guru. And yeah, I really love what you're doing too. And I look forward to seeing where it goes.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.